What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about why I'm getting the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is a series of videos where I talk about if I'm getting or not getting an upcoming game. Texas Chainsaw is definitely one that I'm going to be getting. I played the technical test, and I'm probably going to bring that up quite a bit throughout this video because I've always had confidence that this game was going to be something that I was going to be into. Big fan of Friday the 13th, despite its many flaws, and there are many of them. I really did like that game. And I dabble in really all those kind of games, even the Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed of the world. That game kind of died like a day after release, but I played it. I actually really liked that game. Predator Hunting Grounds, the list goes on and on. Now, obviously, different studios we're talking about here, but this is a game that I think is going to be really fun. Again, it kind of gave me that vibe leading into it, but then when you play the tech test, I think the tech test did everything it needed to do. It is difficult, and that was something that came out of the tech test. I made a review of actually the tech test and said, you know, as survivors or victims or whatever you want to call them, it can be quite difficult. This is a game that I think communication is absolutely key, especially as people continue to get better with the game. That's the really big part, because you think, okay, the game comes out August 18th, right? Comes out in Game Pass. I think that's going to massively help the game with a whole boatload of people that probably otherwise wouldn't get this game. I think they will, okay? So you jump into the game, but then, you know, once you hit September, October, there's a lot of other games. Interest is going to be divided. I think the people that are going to keep this game alive long term, and there should be DLC, there should be, extra maps, extra family members that get added to the game over time, and there will be, but ultimately the players of this game are going to become veterans, right? The people that are going to keep this game alive long term are veterans, and in order to stand a chance, I think, whether you are even Leatherface or you're any of the family members, the killers, or whether you're any of the victims, has to be that communication. That was the number one thing that jumped out at me when I did the tech test. A couple things, actually. One, the game looks beautiful. The game looks really good visually, and I actually was somewhat surprised about that, because a lot of these games don't always look the greatest. They do tend to look a little dated when they release. This game looks really good. It's functionally sound. I think they have done a really good job of making everybody unique, whether actually the victims, because they're unique as well. They have their own abilities, and then also the family members, which are very different from each other, and also very different than what you think of when you think of Friday the 13th. And that's another thing, right? This is, it's a game that's going to remind you of Dead by Daylight. It's a game that's going to remind you of Friday the 13th, but it does, I would say, about as good as it can at being legitimately different in what it's trying to do. I think the atmosphere of this game is actually surprisingly, and when I say surprisingly good, I guess I don't mean that as in I thought it was going to be bad, but I thought the atmosphere, waking up, as a victim, and you're in the basement and Leatherface is kind of locked down there with you, and, immediately you just have this sense of dread that as the victims, you are massively the underdogs. And yes, you can watch people online, and there were, I think as the tech test went on, there were people that kind of took advantage of the killers and were kind of doing some, meme-worthy stuff, let's say, or, there's some pretty fun videos going around of victims just having their day, but there's also videos of the killers having their day. And as this game evolves, I think you're going to be left with this very skilled player base of killers that know exactly what they're doing and know how to keep people where they want to keep them, and know how to tunnel them, and know how to just find the right area where they know the victims are going to be. And then as the victims, they're going to know kind of the sweet spots of being able to hide. They're going to be able to use the grandpa and be able to eliminate him so that you can't see them. Lots of different stuff I think is going to happen as this game goes on. But I think the basic gameplay formula of both sides of this game is really good. Again, atmospherically, I actually think it was so much more than I ever thought it was, to the point of it being kind of elite. I think, again, even just the visuals of this game are super good. It's going to come down to replayability. It's going to come down to keeping this game alive long term. To me, Baldur's Gate 3 obviously is gaining a lot of steam, and I think in terms of like player base, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to absolutely crush August, right? But when I think of August, I actually think of Texas Chainsaw. I think there's a dedicated group of us that also think Texas Chainsaw, but I think Armored Core is obviously a big deal because From Software. I think something like Baldur's Gate as well. And then once you go into September, again, you got the Mortal Kombats of the world, the Starfields. But for me, Texas is one I'm laser focused on. Game Pass, again, I think is really going to help this game, and I hope that it does well. I hope this is a game that can kind of last long term. And something I've talked about when it comes to multiplayer games when I make this, series of videos that I do is, you know, I have a backlog. I have a backlog actually of like single player games, but then I also have backlogs of multiplayer games that are kind of on rotation. I've said that in the past where, you know, I have games like Rocket League, and that's kind of always been on my rotation ever since that game comes out. And I generally play single player games. And, you know, again, a game like this with communication, I'm not always going to want to talk to people. So maybe I take days off or take weeks off, right, to give my life to Starfield, sell my soul and all that stuff, and then come back. And I think this is honestly a perfect game for that. That's what I'm looking for this game primarily. I think I'm going to play this game a lot the first week, first 2 weeks that it's out. But ultimately, and I even did this for Friday the 13th, I played Friday the 13th a ton for the first week, first month. But then as time went on, it became less and less, but it became a game that I would kind of go back to. Now, Friday the 13th had a lot of glitches and bugs and errors and just a lot of stuff going on with that game. Plus, then you couldn't add anything because of the court case, right? The legal stuff. So there was never any DLC to kind of continue to expand the game in a meaningful, like an actual gigantic way. That should not happen with this game. So my hope is to play this game a ton initially, to give it, you know, a break and to give breaks, I guess, to myself over time to play other games, but always be able to come back to this game. And then, because it doesn't have the issues, hopefully, that Friday the 13th has, we should see reoccurring things. So we should see new characters, new victims, new family members. That'll massively help. New maps. That'll massively help. And so I really do hope this game lasts a very, very long time. And I'm also excited to see the impact that this game makes. Look, this game doing well doesn't only help this game, it helps the genre. It helps get a Halloween style game. It helps get a Scream game that I'll never shut up about, right? Like, this is kind of how you do it. Although we don't have the things that maybe some of us, again, including myself for Scream, they don't give us those things. They give us this. I think this is a very good, you know, quality product, at least in the tech test it was. And I think by supporting it, not only are we going to have fun as players of it, but hopefully it sends a message to these companies and says, yeah, you know, we can do more of this stuff. We don't just have to do, you know, one every 5 years. And hopefully that's what happens. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.